Even in a bumper year like 2026, which feels like it's only just getting started with the big releases, there are more than a few stinkers. Among those are titles that couldn't measure up to expectations, regardless of how little they were hyped. And yet, even with the faintest hope for something fun, one's disappointment is immeasurable, and their day is ruined. So let's count down the 10 most disappointing games of the year thus far, starting with the 9th Charnal. There's a sense that the development team behind this, they had grand plans. Multiple playable characters with different backstories, survival mechanics, stealth, quote, realistic graphics. Their words, not mine. It seems intriguing enough until you actually play it. Poor performance, terrible voice acting, awful controls, that it even runs feels like a miracle. Minimal expectations aside, there's just a sheer lack of redeeming qualities that would make you hope for the better. Which sounds like a good segue to Code Violet. On the one hand, what can one expect anything from Team Kill Media in this day and age? Quantum Error was awful, but at least there was some sense that the studio was trying. Failing, sure, but trying all the same to make something. Sun and Bone was a waste of time, and with Code Violet, it appears to have given up even attempting to make an entertaining game. Awful story, awful gameplay, bland characters. The only reason it isn't higher up is because of the negative hype that was going into it. Bubsy 4D. I wasn't much of a Bubsy fan back in the day, but I admit that he's had a rough time of it over the years. So seeing a 3D comeback like this from developer Febreze was a nice feeling, with some decent humor and an intriguing, if ultimately uninteresting, premise. But as it wore on, it became evident that Bubsy, annoying as he could be, was the least of this game's problems, whether it's the barren levels, occasional iffy platforming, or a janky camera. Knowing what the developer is capable of, Bubsy 4D couldn't measure up, even under little pressure. Aphilion. Aphilion struggles to make a strong impression. Its story may have moments that pull you in, but it never reaches the level of intrigue or emotional weight it seems to be aiming for. The bigger issue is the gameplay, which quickly becomes a drag, with poor controls making even basic interactions feel more frustrating than they should. No one was expecting a sci-fi masterpiece, but it is still surprising how flat and uninteresting Aphilion feels overall. Atomic Heart: Blood on Crystal. And speaking of uninteresting, if this were the first DLC for P3's Bizarre Adventure, I could see the reasoning for not expecting much. But this is the finale, the one that sets up the future, never mind the conclusion to the conflict between P3 and Charles. Instead, we get repetitive combat, annoying and tiresome traversal, and the same awful dialogue that marred the base game. If anything, at least it's over, and we can move on to better things, even if Blood on Crystal doesn't inspire much hope for the future. Kiln. Maybe this hits more personally than the others because you can see the sheer charm and originality in Kiln's universe, but there's still no denying how much of a bad idea it was from the word go. I'm all for supporting a studio's creativity, but a multiplayer arena brawler in this day and age, and that too from a team renowned for its single-player efforts? Did Double Fine not see what happened with Ninja Theory and Bleeding Edge? As a whole, Kiln doesn't even muster above interesting. It's as insubstantial as they come, and all the charm in the world cannot save it. Romeo Is a Dead Man. If there's anything you should take away from its placement on this list, it's that I very much wanted to like Grasshopper Manufacture's latest. The style, the atmosphere calling back to tokusatsu greats like Ultraman and Kamen Rider, and the trippy narrative, which went beyond your average intergalactic hunt for space-time fugitives into something more surreal, were all pretty strong. It's just that the actual gameplay left so much to be desired, especially with repetitive combat, underwhelming level design, lackluster enemy variety, and shoddy performance. While it's not the worst game of all time, it definitely needed more polish to match its overwhelming sense of style, especially given what the studio has been capable of at its peak. Dead or Alive 6: Last Round. Far be it from the base game to inspire much love, either from longtime fans or fighting game nerds, but you would think in 2026 that Team Ninja and Koei Tecmo would attempt a clean slate. Dead or Alive 7 has been announced after all. Surely they could revitalize Dead or Alive 6 with revamped mechanics, balance changes, less awful monetization, rollback netcode, and a tag team mode that fans have been craving for years and years. Well, Last Round doesn't offer any of that. In fact, it demands you repurchase all of those characters and their costumes at higher prices. And to even rub more salt into that wound, the 2019 version has been delisted, which means you're paying for a buggier follow-up that's also trying to fleece you. Is this the same Koei Tecmo that released Neo 3 and Pokemon Pokopia, two of the year's best games? Well, while the controversy will likely die down when Dead or Alive 7 rolls around, it's amazing how well the publisher has effectively killed interest in this series, making anyone who cared about it feel like an utter fool. Starfield Terran Armada. Well, it's only $10, a far cry from the awful Shattered Space that cost $30, and Bethesda clearly wasn't aiming very high. Terran Armada is still frustratingly disappointing. After a year of relative silence, it should have offered a worthwhile narrative to accompany Freelane's many new systems and quality of life improvements. It should have been Bethesda over-delivering for fans in terms of storytelling. Instead, there's a new faction, enemy robots, some new ships to battle and commandeer, and incursions to partake in. Imagine if the menial tasks in Fallout 4 actually became main mission content, against the backdrop of an initially promising story that, once again, flops on execution. And if you're a new player, especially with the recent PS5 version, the sheer number of bugs for the DLC alone would make you swear off Bethesda games entirely. Terran Armada may not be Bethesda's worst ever, but it should have been an opportunity to do better rather than phoning it in. Highguard. Some games fail because of unreasonable expectations, which usually emerge from extensive hype, which is what made Wildlight Entertainment's Raid Hero shooter such a fascinating anomaly. Everyone audibly groaned when it closed out the Game Awards, but the sheer audacity of it all actually drove some manner of anticipation, even if it was to watch the game fail. The lack of communication leading up to its January launch was equally interpreted as the studio avoiding backlash and perhaps cooking up something special. Then Highguard actually dropped, just as it promised, and it was, well, not great. A mishmash of wildly conflicting genres, coupled with mostly uninspired heroes, painfully long matches, horrendous optimization, and more, ultimately sullied some interesting environments and solid gunplay. Less than 2 months and numerous layoffs later, it was dead. You would think expecting anything from yet another dry live service title would be folly, but given the studio's experience, the years in development, and its funding, which may or may not have come from Tencent, it wasn't your average project in terms of scale. If it ended up enjoyable, who knows how many of those players who checked it out on day one, expecting a massive failure, would have stuck around. So long, Highguard, we hardly knew ye. But at least you made everyone question that one last announcement at every Summer Games Fest, Game Awards, and so on going forward. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Vault, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.